In today's video, we're going to do some baking, and this is a Saturday, so if you hear noise, it's my family. Scott is listening to the radio and working, and there's going to be might be some ruckus going on, but I felt like baking some yeast bread today, and I thought I would share the recipe with you. Now, I've never made this bread before, but it sounded really good, so let me get my workstation set up, and we'll get started. So the first step in this bread is you have to kind of prep the yeast. So I have 2 cups of warm water here, and I'm going to put it in this bowl. And then it calls for 5 tablespoons of rapid rise yeast. I don't know if this is rapid rise, but it's Fleischmann's active dry yeast, and I really like Fleischmann's brand. So I'm going to go ahead and put 5 tablespoons in here. Oh, it's 5 teaspoons. I'm glad I double checked that. So there's 3 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. I got to thinking 5 tablespoons, that's an awful lot. So there was 3, 4, 5. Just whisk this up. And then you just let this sit for a couple of minutes for the yeast to dissolve. After 2 to 3 minutes of the yeast and water resting, you can see how it's starting to foam. That means this is good yeast and it's active. So to this you want to briskly whisk in 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil or canola oil, 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of honey, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of salt, which seems like an awfully lot, but really do what it says. I'm not going to add the salt in until I add some flour in, because I've always heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've always heard if you put salt directly in with yeast, it will kill the yeast. So I'm going to wait a little bit on that. Now I have to make a few alterations to this recipe because I didn't have all of the ingredients that they called for. It calls for 1/4 cup of dark rye flour, and I don't have rye flour, so I'm going to go ahead and just use some of this sprouted wheat flour. Then you're going to put in 1 cup of whole wheat flour. This is a 1/2 cup measure, so I'll put 2 of these in. Then a 1/2 cup of chopped up unsalted sunflower seeds. I just put my whole sunflower seeds into my spice grinder and whizzed them up a couple of times. It also calls for 2 tablespoons of cracked wheat, like wheat berries. I do not have that, but I do have pumpkin seeds. I'm going to go ahead and break these up the same way I did the sunflower seeds in my little spice grinder here. And then go ahead and add those. Another item I did not have, so I'm going to substitute, is it called for 2 tablespoons of flax seeds, ground flax seeds. I am going to substitute for hulled hemp seeds. Then it calls for 2 tablespoons of sesame. Oh no! Oh man! Boy, that was slick, wasn't it? I wonder what they would do if something like that happened on a cooking show. They have to just start all over. I am a very messy cook, and I almost always have some sort of a mishap. Well, there. Got most of the sunflower seeds in there, or I mean sesame seeds. So then at this point, remember I have not added the salt yet, which I will do shortly. But at this point, you're going to go ahead and put your bowl onto your mixer and start using the dough hook. Okay, so at this point is when you start adding the bread flour, and you want to make sure you use bread flour for this. And it calls for 3 to 4 cups. And I've got a ½ cup measure here, so I'm going to go ahead and dump in 4 of these, which would be 2 cups of flour. I'm going to mix that up with my dough hook, and then I'm going to add the salt. Okay, so I went ahead and added another cup of flour, and it says, the recipe says to add enough flour to make a sticky but cohesive dough, which is about the point we're at right now. So I'm not going to add any more flour at this point. Now you want to go ahead and put this on the lowest speed of the mixer and let the dough hook knead the dough for 8 to 10 minutes. So this is what the dough looks like after 8 minutes with the dough hook. So the next thing you need to do is you need to just leave the dough in the bowl and lightly spray it with cooking spray. And you spray the side of the bowl with the cooking spray too. That helps the dough rise up the top, or rise up the sides of the bowl, I should say. So then you just cover this with, it says here with a plastic bag, a large plastic bag, but I'm just going to cover it with some parchment paper, and I'm going to stick it in my oven, and the oven's turned off, but we have a pilot light, so the pilot light makes the oven stay kind of a warm temperature all the time. It's just enough warmth to rise yeast dough perfectly. So you let this rise for 45 minutes to an hour until it is doubled. So when this has risen to double, I'll bring you back and show you what you do next. So it's been about 45 minutes and it's raised and it looks really lovely. So the next thing you need to do is you need to turn it out onto a floured surface, a lightly floured surface. And then you're going to gently deflate it. So once it's gently deflated, you just leave it on your work surface, cover it again with a towel or parchment, and you let it rest for 15 minutes. So this recipe will make 2 regular sized loaves, but I'm going to make my bread in my Pullman pan, which I'm just going to put all of the dough in it. And the Pullman pan, although it is a non-stick surface, you do want to go ahead and grease it, but you don't want to use cooking spray it'll mess it up. So I'm just using some shortening on a plastic bag here, and I'm just going to grease the pan really well. And you also want to grease the lid. I learned this trick of putting your hand in a plastic bag to grease from Kimmy from She's in Her Apron. That's the way she greases her bread pans. And it keeps the grease from getting all over your hands. So I'm going to go ahead and just grease the lid. And we're going to set that aside. So then ordinarily at this point, my timer just went off, you would divide this dough into two to make 2 loaves. But like I said, I'm making 1 loaf. So then on a piece of parchment paper, you want to sprinkle some sunflower seeds. And again, these are the unsalted sunflower seeds. And the recipe doesn't say how many, so I'm just kind of guessing. And it also said to use the cracked wheat, but like I said, I don't have any, so I'm using sesame seeds. And then you're going to go ahead and put this dough on parchment paper and just kind of push it into those seeds firmly, kind of roll it, because you're just trying to encrust the top of the loaf with seeds. So it's about the right size for my pan. It's a little long, and I'm going to go ahead and plop it in, and you want the seed side up. I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle some more of these seeds on the top and press them in and baste them. So there we have that. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on this, and then you let it rise again for 45 to 90 minutes or until it doubles in size. Now I have somewhere I need to go, so I'm going to go ahead and cover it with the lid and stick this in the refrigerator, and then when I get home I will pull it out and we'll let it start its rising then. So that's a little trick. If you start a loaf of yeast dough and you end up having to go somewhere, if you just stick it in the refrigerator, it slows the rising process down. So when I get back and when this has risen to double, I'll bring you back and show you what to do next. We were gone about 2 hours, and I had this, as I said, I was going to put this in the refrigerator, and I had the metal lid on it. And when we got back after 2 hours, it was all the way raised up to the lid. Now if you want a sandwich bread that is perfectly square, then you bake your bread with the lid on it. But this bread, I wanted it to be more rounded, so I took the lid off, let it set out for about a half hour just to get more room temperature and to rise just a little bit more. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven. I have been preheating the oven at 375 degrees. You place the bread in the oven, and then you immediately reduce the temperature to 350 degrees, and you bake it until it's nicely browned all over, about 35 to 40 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the oven. When it's ready to come out of the oven, I'll bring you back. So here it is out of the oven. It was in for 35 minutes. Sorry for the shadows. That's the time of day I'm in. But isn't it gorgeous? And listen to the thump. This is what bread sounds like when it's done. It has like a hollow sound. So we have to let this cool, and then everyone's eager to try it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed baking with me today. I will have the ingredients and the entire recipe in the description box below if you want to give this bread a try. We'll talk to you later, friends. Bye-bye. This was probably one of the best breads I have ever made, and I have made a lot of yeast breads. I love to bake yeast breads, so I try different recipes, and this, I have to say, is one of the best I've ever made. The family loved it. I made this loaf on Saturday. By Monday morning it was gone, and I had to make another loaf on Tuesday. I highly, highly recommend that you give this recipe a try.